welcome to the garden. Today I'm going to share with you my top 5 things to consider when starting a new compost pile. The first thing you want to consider is location. It should be accessible so that it's not inconvenient to use, but it's good to have it far enough away to where you don't have to smell it if any issues should arise. You also want to consider your neighbors so that you're not inconveniencing them. The second thing you want to consider is the size of your container. This is the one that I started with, and it's basically just a plastic trash can. I did cut some holes in the side for ventilation, but I soon found out that this was way too small for my purposes. These tumblers are of a decent size, and they rotate, so it's pretty easy to turn the pile, but they're a little bit too small for my garden. So I upgraded to a much larger bin that I made out of an old boat. It is a little unconventional, but it gets the job done. The third thing to consider is having enough carbon-rich material. Dried leaves are my favorite carbon source to balance out the nitrogen-rich food scraps. I use about equal parts dried leaves and kitchen scraps to make my finished compost. The only carbon source that might be better than dried leaves is sawdust, but it's a lot easier for me to get dried leaves. And you can use shredded newspaper and cardboard in a pinch. If you want to learn more about carbon and nitrogen ratios, you can click on this link over here. Now that we have a location, a large container, and a reliable source of carbon, we can finally start to add our food scraps. I'm not going to go into detail on what you can and cannot compost. I basically compost everything. The fourth thing to consider is the container for your food scraps. This will sit in your kitchen, and really you don't need anything fancy. You can start right now with a little recycled container. So this will hold about a week's worth of food scraps. You want something with a good lid so that you don't have to smell those food scraps. And if you keep it in the fridge, that'll keep down that scent even further. Eventually you're going to want to upgrade to something like this. This is a really large container, and for our household it holds about 3 weeks to a month worth of food scraps. We've got a really nice lid that's got a good strong seal so we don't have to worry about smells, but we've got this little easy access flap that really makes it a breeze. You may want to consider also incorporating a dry bin, and I use this basically like a wastebasket. It's got paper towels, tissues, little leaves from the indoor garden, and once our bin is full, I add equal parts of our dried leaves. So 1 bin full of vegetable scraps and 1 bin full of dried leaves. That ends up being a nice balance. So a container this size is about a heaping handful of kitchen scraps. So we'd balance that with about a heaping handful of dried leaves. And if you're ever in doubt, just add more carbon-rich material like these dried leaves. Now, things like sawdust are a little bit different. They're a much higher carbon ratio, so you could probably get away with just a little handful. But the fifth and final thing to consider when starting a brand new compost pile is how much work do you want to put in? You really don't want to have a pocket of nitrogen-rich food scraps separated from your carbon-rich leaves. You want to mix them all together. This also aerates the pile, which will keep it from going anaerobic. If it goes anaerobic or decomposes without air, it can smell a lot worse. And after a few months, you should have some nice finished compost. You'll know your compost is finished when it looks and smells like soil. It just smells like a forest floor. This is beautiful stuff and can go directly onto the garden. Or you can mix it with native soil or potting soil to start a new container, or add it to a watering can and make a batch of compost tea. If you want to learn more about my compost tea, it's super simple. I'll provide a link right up here. But I do use this sifter just to filter out any unfinished material. When I add a new container, I don't actually separate it from the old stuff. I'll just mix it all in together. So some of the pile's finished, some of it's actually brand new. If you don't want to do quite so much labor, you can have different sections. Anytime you add new material, just separate it from the old material. You could even start a new container or a new pile. That way, when this side of the pile is done, the entire thing is done. And that's just a little bit less work, but it does take a little bit more time. So these are all really important things to consider when starting a brand new pile. If you found this information helpful, let me know in the comments or with a thumbs up. And don't forget to share this video with anyone you think will want to start their own compost pile. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.